What if the ancient gods of mythology weren't myths at all? What if they were real beings, fallen angels, cast out of heaven, and remembered across history under different names? From Mesopotamia to Mount Olympus, from the pyramids of Egypt to the frozen myths of the Norse, echoes of the same beings appear. This isn't just mythology, it's a distorted memory of a cosmic rebellion, one the Bible reveals in startling detail. In this two-part series, we're exploring the global legacy of the sons of God, those mysterious beings from Genesis 6, who came down from heaven, took human wives, and gave rise to the Nephilim. But the story doesn't stop there. These watchers didn't just corrupt humanity, they shaped the very foundations of ancient civilizations. These were the gods of the nations, remembered in myths, worshipped in temples, and feared in legend. Today, we begin in the biblical foundation, then uncover how four ancient cultures, the Mesopotamian, the Egyptian, Greek, and the Norse, each preserved a shadow of this story, like pieces in a forgotten puzzle. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing. We dive deep into biblical mysteries, ancient history, and the unseen war that still shapes our world. Genesis 6, 1-4 reveals a strange and often overlooked episode in biblical history. It speaks of the sons of God, Bene Elohim, who saw that the daughters of men were beautiful. They took wives, and from these unions came the Nephilim, giants, mighty warriors, and men of renown. The Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text once widely read and referenced by early Christians, explains this very narrative. According to Enoch, chapters 6-15, 200 angels descended to earth on Mount Hermon. Their leaders were Semyaza and Azazel. These beings didn't just violate God's boundary between heaven and earth. They corrupted humanity. They taught forbidden knowledge, how to forge weapons, use cosmetics for seduction, perform magic, summon spirits, and chart the stars. Azazel, in particular, taught metallurgy, sparking bloodshed and warfare across the world. The result was a corrupted world, dominated by hybrid offspring, the Nephilim, who consumed everything and everyone, and turned on mankind. Then God judged them. The Nephilim were destroyed by the flood. The rebellious watchers were bound in Tartarus, a prison of darkness beneath the earth, reserved until the day of judgment. This story is echoed in Jude 6 and 2 Peter 2:4 in the New Testament. But the story doesn't end there. After the Tower of Babel, humanity was scattered across the earth. Deuteronomy 32, 8-9 in the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls versions tells us that God divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God. 70 nations, 70 divine rulers. These sons of God, members of the divine council, were placed as spiritual authorities over each nation, but they too became corrupt. Psalm 82 shows God rebuking these Elohim. You are gods, sons of the Most High, but you shall die like men. The nations turned to idolatry, worshiping their appointed rulers as gods. Paul confirms this in 1 Corinthians 10:20, saying that Gentiles sacrifice to demons, not to God. But from this framework, the ancient pantheons of the world are not mere inventions. They're distorted memories of real spiritual entities who once ruled over mankind. Let's begin our discussion and exploration of the sons of God in Mesopotamia, the birthplace of writing, cities, and empires. Here we find the earliest echoes of the Watchers. The Sumerians told of the Apkallu, semi-divine beings and sages sent from the god Enki to teach mankind before the flood. These beings brought knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and civilization. But later, Akkadian texts warn that some Apkallu grew corrupt. They took human wives. They defiled the will of the gods. They were punished and banished to the abyss. The Epic of Gilgamesh gives us a glimpse into this world. Gilgamesh, a historical king of Uruk, is described as 2/3 divine. He's a giant, a warrior, and a seeker of immortality. In many ways, Gilgamesh resembles a Nephilim. He rules with might, defies death, and interacts with divine beings. Then there are the Anunnaki and the Ajiji, powerful sky gods. The Ajiji are said to have rebelled against the Anunnaki, leading to the creation of humans to bear their burdens. This divine rebellion echoes the fall of the Watchers that we see in Scripture. The Sumerian Kings list also tells us of rulers who lived before and after the Great Flood, most importantly, aligning chronologically with the 600 years before the flood, during the time of Jared, when the Watchers descended and began their rule over mankind. After the flood, kingship is said to have descended from heaven again. The divine right to rule persisted, suggesting continued Watcher influence over post-flood humanity. Even geographically, the story aligns to the Bible. Babylonian lore places the Anunnaki near Anti-Lebanon Mountains, the same region where 1st Enoch says the Watchers descended, Mount Hermon. As we leave Mesopotamia, we travel southwest to a land of towering monuments and golden gods. Egypt, the kingdom of the Nile, preserved its own version of this celestial drama. The Egyptian civilization claimed divine origins. According to Manetho, an Egyptian priest writing in the 3rd century BC, the earliest rulers of Egypt were not humans, but gods. Ptah, Ra, Osiris, and Horus. These beings ruled for thousands of years. After them came demigods and spirit beings, and only then did mortal pharaohs take the throne. These god kings were not idle. They taught writing, medicine, agriculture, and ritual. The god Thoth was credited with inventing hieroglyphics, astronomy, and sacred mathematics, areas also attributed to the Watchers in Enoch. Osiris, the green-skinned god of life and death, brought agriculture and kingship. His story of death and resurrection formed the basis for Egyptian theology and influenced later Greco-Roman mystery cults. Pharaohs were considered sons of Ra. Each king was the living Horus, and upon death became Osiris. This divine identity wasn't just symbolic, it was literal. But Scripture pulls back the curtain. In Exodus, God systematically strikes down Egypt's gods. The plagues were not random. Each one targeted a specific deity. The Nile turned to blood, judging Hapi, god of the Nile. Darkness fell, judging Ra, god of the sun. And death of the firstborn, judging Osiris, lord of life and death. Exodus 12:12 makes it very clear. On all the gods of Egypt I will execute my judgment. The gods of Egypt were real, spiritual powers who once ruled a nation, now facing the wrath of the true Most High. Now, let's journey north to the marble temples and mythic epics of ancient Greece. Here, the story of the Watchers appears in full dramatic color. Greek mythology begins with a rebellion. The Titans, led by Kronos, overthrow Uranus, the primordial sky. But Kronos, too, is overthrown by Zeus, who casts the Titans into Tartarus. Tartarus is a deep prison of torment beneath the earth. It's the same term Peter uses in 2 Peter 2:4 to describe where the rebellious angels are bound. The parallels are striking. Zeus and the Olympians represented a new divine order, but the sins of the past repeat. Zeus fathers numerous children with mortal women, producing the demigods, Heracles, Perseus, and Achilles. These were men of incredible strength, valor, and often tragic flaws. In biblical terms, they were Nephilim, mighty men of old, men of renown. Greek mythology also recounts a great war, the Gigantomachy, between the gods and the giants, who rose up to challenge Olympus. In some version, the giants are born from the blood of Uranus, spilled on Gaia. In others, they're the children of Gaia and Tartarus. Either way, they are divine human hybrids, chaotic and powerful. And there is a flood. In the time of Deucalion, Zeus sends a deluge to wipe out a wicked and violent humanity. Only Deucalion and his wife, Pyrrha, survive, echoing Noah and his family. Church fathers like Justin Martyr and Athenagoras believe that Greek gods were fallen angels. The stories were true, but misrepresented. Heroes were not noble, they were dangerous. Greek myth preserved the story of the Watchers, but it turned the rebellion into a pantheon, and the Nephilim into demigods to admire. And now we head into the far north, a world of ice, fire, and prophecy. The Norse myths hold their own fragmented memory of divine war and ancient corruption. In the Norse creation story, the first being is Ymir, a primordial giant. From him comes the race of Jotnar, giants who oppose the gods. Ymir is slain by Odin and his brothers, and from his body they fashion the world. His blood floods the earth, a memory of the great deluge. The gods of the time, the Aesir and the Vanir, rule the world, but are constantly at war with the giants. These battles echo the spiritual conflict between the faithful angels and the fallen Watchers. Many Norse clans also trace their lineage back to Odin himself. The idea of divine kingship lives on here too, just as it did in Mesopotamia. Royal lines claim descent from the gods, just as ancient rulers across the world did. And then there's Loki, a trickster god who fathers monstrous beings with a giantess. Fenrir, the world-ending wolf. Jormungandr, the serpent that encircles the earth. And Hel, queen of the underworld. Loki is eventually bound in chains, with poison dripping on his face, until the final battle of Ragnarök. Sound familiar? Azazel in Enoch is bound beneath the earth until the day of judgment. Revelation tells of imprisoned beings released during the tribulation. Ragnarök is a Norse version of the pre-flood world, when the gods fought the giants. The earth was destroyed and a new world was born. In this story, the echoes of the Bible reverberate: a fall, a flood, a binding, and a final war. You know, throughout history, some of the most fascinating and thought-provoking moments have happened behind the scenes, in the inner circles. From the councils of ancient empires to the Last Supper, from secret plots against kings to quiet grassroots rebellions. What happens in secret often matters most. So that's why I created a place for our own inner circle over on Patreon. It's where the most dedicated members of this channel gather to go deeper down the rabbit holes, help shape future topics, and see raw, unfiltered behind-the-scenes episodes you won't find anywhere else. So meet us there, join the council, and see for yourself why what happens in secret changes everything. Ancient India's religious history is vast, complex, and filled with divine beings who walked the earth. In the Mahabharata, one of the oldest epics in world history, we find heroes who are not fully human. The Pandava brothers, the protagonists of the tale, are born from human women, but fathered by gods. Yudhishthira is fathered by the god of justice, Bhima by the wind god Vanu, Arjuna by Indra, the sky god. These are all demigods, warriors of immense strength, wielding divine weapons. They are praised as heroes, but from a biblical lens, they resemble the Nephilim. The Mahabharata even describes the earth groaning under the weight of wicked, powerful beings, until the gods act to wipe them out in a massive war. It's the same cycle: hybrid offspring, violence, and judgment. Hindu texts also speak of the Asuras, spiritual beings who once dwelt in heaven, but fell into rebellion. They war against the Devas, the heavenly gods. The Devas and the Asuras are cousins, both divine lineages, but split between loyalty and rebellion. This mirrors, of course, the divine council we find in Scripture. Some angels remain loyal to God, while others rebel. And then there's the flood of Manu. In this story, a god appears to a man named Manu and warns him of a coming flood. Manu builds a boat and survives. He becomes the new ancestor of mankind. Even the 7 sages survive with him, reminiscent, of course, of the Mesopotamian Apkallu, or Noah's tale. It's another thread in the tapestry of global flood memory. From the jungles of India, now we're going to travel northeast to a civilization that revered the dragon and recorded history through dynasties of heavenly rulers. In Chinese tradition, the earliest rulers weren't mere mortals. They were the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, semi-divine sages who taught humanity the essentials of civilization. Fuji invented writing, fishing, and domestication. Shenyang, the divine farmer, taught medicine and agriculture. Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, brought order, warfare, and technology. These figures lived for hundreds, even thousands of years. Some were depicted with serpentine lower bodies, suggesting their divine or hybrid origins. Their reign is said to have occurred in a golden age, long before the first human dynasties. The parallels to the antediluvian world in Genesis are very clear. Chinese mythology also preserves a flood story, the tale of Yu the Great. A massive flood covers the land. Only through divine help is it controlled. Yu becomes the founder of the Xia dynasty. There's also a story of Nuwa, a goddess who repairs the heavens after a catastrophe, echoing the divine intervention to preserve the world after judgment. We also see in later Taoist and Buddhist traditions a vast celestial bureaucracy, gods, and spirit kings, and immortals ruling regions of the earth. This, of course, mirrors Deuteronomy 32, and the worldview of spiritual rulers who were assigned to the nations. Now we're going to cross the oceans to the Americas. Despite the distance, the stories that echo have the same pattern. Among the Maya, Aztec, and Inca civilizations, we find reoccurring themes of sky gods, floods, giants, and civilizing deities. Let's start with Quetzalcoatl, a feathered serpent of Mesoamerican myth. Also known as Kukulkan to the Maya, Quetzalcoatl was said to have descended from the heavens. He taught humans writing, astronomy, agriculture, and law. He opposed human sacrifice. He was eventually driven out, but promised to return one day. Now, doesn't Quetzalcoatl sound a lot like one of the Watchers, bringing advanced knowledge to early humanity? We see, in fact, Aztec mythology describes multiple suns or world ages. In one of these, the world was destroyed by a great flood, and humanity turned into fish. Before the flood, the land was inhabited by giants, called the Quinametsin, who were wiped out when the heavens collapsed. Among the Inca, we find Viracocha, another bearded, light-skinned god who came from the sea, taught civilization, and then departed. Like Quetzalcoatl, he too was associated with creation and restoration after a cataclysm. And also, in North America, Native American legends speak of star people, sky gods, and giants. The Cherokee, the Sioux, the Hopi all preserve fragments of these stories, beings who descended, intermingled, and then departed. Many of these beings brought knowledge, but they also brought corruption and demanded worship. So, what does all of this mean? Well, around the world, cultures remember a time when gods walked among men. They remember knowledge being gifted, boundaries being crossed, and judgment being poured out. From the Apkallu in Mesopotamia to the Pandavas of India, from the god kings of Egypt to the feathered serpents of the Americas, it's the same pattern. The names are different, the temples look different, but the central story is always the same. The Bible tells us in Genesis 6 that the sons of God came down to earth, took human wives, and gave birth to giants, the Nephilim. In 1 Enoch, we see these beings teaching humanity forbidden knowledge, creating chaos and being judged. These were the Watchers. After Babel, God divides the nations and allots them to other divine beings, rulers who later became corrupt. Psalm 82 shows their condemnation. Paul calls them demons. In every culture we've examined, from Sumer to Scandinavia, India to China, the Andes to the Mesoamerica, we see the same story wearing different masks. A heavenly rebellion, forbidden union, hybrid offspring, and divine knowledge, judgment by a flood, and the lingering memory of gods who once ruled the earth. But these are not all coincidences. These are cultural distortions of a singular, true story, one preserved faithfully in the Bible. The Watchers became the gods of the nations. The Nephilim became the legendary heroes, giants, and monsters of myth. And the Most High God, the God of Israel, stood alone, untouched by corruption, preparing a plan to reclaim the nations through his Messiah. This is why Christ's victory matters. In Colossians 2:15, Paul writes that Jesus disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them. You see, through the cross, Jesus didn't just save individuals. He began a cosmic reclamation, stripping authority from the fallen sons of God who ruled over the nations and bringing those nations back under the rule of the King of Kings. This isn't just ancient history, it's the story of reality itself, and it points forward to a day when all the false gods will fall and the glory of the Lord will fill the earth as the waters cover the sea. If this 2-episode series has given you a new lens through which to see history and our world, and the unseen war behind it, then please give it a share and a like. Let's start a conversation. Let others see the patterns that have been hidden in plain sight. Please like, subscribe, and comment for more deep dives into the mysteries we find in Scripture and ancient civilizations and the spiritual battle that rages through it all. You can also find Glory Concealed on X and Instagram at Glory Concealed, as well as on Spotify and Rumble. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and give glory to the one true King.